So we have director and writer Curtis Chin and his short, Warren King, King of Cardboard. We also have Sarita Khurana, director of The Last Resort, and co-director Reaa Puri with her film, Harvest Party at Camp 2. Enjoy the trailers, and we'll get on with the panel. Thank you.
I'm a Chinese-American artist. I work in cardboard, figurative sculpture. I started art late. I went into engineering because it was expected of me. Once I started making art, it opened up a whole new world that I had never been a part of or understood. The most important thing about my whole art practice is just the opportunity it gives me to connect with the community around me. The stories of my family, my culture, my experiences, my own identity. Along with that comes this sense of just like belonging. I started working with cardboard really because it was just around. The first stuff that I ever made was for my two boys. The way I use it is pretty unique because I don't handle the cardboard in an unnatural way. If you look at cardboard and you look at the material, it has a certain character. It's two pieces of paper with corrugations in between. There's a front side and a back side, and there's differences between the two. Even when I color it and paint it, I only want to use certain types of treatments because I don't want to lose that texture of the paper. And I approach working with cardboard very similar to woodworking. The best woodworkers, they know the character of the wood. They're very attentive to the grain and the shape and the natural properties of the wood.
My brother and I expected that they would just age in place where they were. But there was something about the cultural aspect I thought might work for them here. It was like I couldn't imagine them going to a white retirement community.
As I came here, I found that many of us are single, and we kind of have a good company with each other. We are doing the little things that bring you back to what you have missed for so many years after coming to this country.
Dad?
Yeah.
Do you want to be cremated and then your ashes put into?
Yeah, someplace.
Or do you want your body buried?
That doesn't matter after I'm dead.
This is a piece of India in Florida, a community where you come for your golden years to live in peace and happiness. But a crude reality, this is a place to die.
And then one day, I found this. That's my dad, at a party I'd only ever heard whispers about. How could something so full of life be left out of the story I grew up with?
Hi, I'm Pam Torno. I'm the Senior Manager of Short Form Content at ITVS. And I know this sentiment has probably been shared a bunch of times already, but I just want to say how exciting it is to be here at CAAMFest again, to gather in community and to see these amazing stories and to feel seen and to make good trouble, as Don Young said in his opening night speech. So short documentaries are a huge role in that, and so I wanted to introduce my esteemed filmmaker panelists. Come on up at the same time. Come on up, come on up. Oh. All right, to my immediate left, oh my goodness, is Reaa Puri. She is the co-director of Harvest Party at Camp 2. Reaa tells stories about what connects us across difference. She's also a TEDx speaker, a two-time Cannes Lions Gold Award winner, and the founder of Reascend Creative. And she grew up between California, India, and Kuwait. Full disclosure, ITVS was a co-producer of Harvest Party at CAAM 2, and I worked directly with Reaa and her co-director, Rajan Gill, on this wonderful film. Next to her is Curtis Chin, director of Warren King, King of Cardboard. Curtis is also the author of the award-winning memoir, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, and I would like to read that book. Sarita Khurana is the director of The Last Resort. Sarita has been making films for the past 25 years. In addition to her short film at the festival, she is world premiering her new feature film, Seat at the Table, about South Asians in US politics. I would like to start off with a question that you all can answer. There's so many relatable touch points in each of your films. They're wonderful conversation starters. I would love to hear what motivated you to tell these stories and why they ended up being shorts. So I'm going to start in the middle with Curtis, actually.
Hi, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to CAAM for putting this together, and ADOC for putting together the panel. I have a new name for the panel though. It's called We Wear Short Shorts.
Good
Anyway,
one.
that's just my pitch.
You should have been
Sorry.
consulted on the titling of it.
Yeah, so Warren's story really spoke to me. Are we talking about how the films came about first, or is that a separate question?
I guess it's a two-parter. You can tell me. I'd love to hear about the story first, and then you can talk about how it came to be as a short. Or maybe those two things are intertwined for you.
They're sort of intertwined.
Yeah,
for me.
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was on this big book tour for my memoir, and I wasn't in the mood to make another film because I was so focused on the book. But I was approached by American Masters to say, hey, we have this new funding cycle coming up. Would you like to submit a proposal for it? And that's when I thought, well, if PBS is reaching out, you should probably come up with a proposal. And so the way I found Warren is I actually posted up on Facebook, hey, does anybody know any cool artists? And I had all these wonderful recommendations, children's book authors, dancers, actors, a lot of actors sending in their own self-tapes. But, this one friend who actually lives in the Bay Area here said, oh, there's this guy who I served on the PTA with, and he does these really wonderful cardboard art. And I just looked at his website, and I really fell in love with his artwork. But more importantly, as I got to know his story more, the fact that he was from the Midwest, the fact that he was dealing with something that I had been dealing with, which is the idea of family businesses and successorship. I mean, in his situation, it was a family engineering firm that his dad wanted him to take over. But for me, it was a Chinese restaurant. But I felt like we were going through a lot of the same emotional beats in that sense. And so that's what really drew me to the story. But then on top of that, there was this rise in anti-immigrant sentiment in America a couple years ago, which is still kind of at peak level now. And I just thought it was important to tell a positive story to remind people, of the importance of immigrants to this country and the journeys that these people are going through. So.
It's awesome. And hi, everyone. It's so awesome to be here. So my film that I co-directed with Rajan Gill, who's actually here, hi. It follows Punjabi Sikh farm workers in 1980s Yuba City, California. And, at the time, these were folks who their lives were focused on labor, and so they weren't allowed to go to prom. They had really strict parents. And, at the end of the season, you had this thing called a harvest party, and so they used this opportunity to kind of turn it into this really wild, big party that ended up bringing the town together in a lot of ways through a time of a lot of racial division and all kinds of things that was happening in rural America in the 80s. And why we started to make this, Raj and I were working on another project called Channel BB, which also is a fully funded project that we can talk about. And Rajan was telling me about his upbringing in the farm. He worked in peach farming, also is a history professor. My grandfather moved to California in the 80s also to work in farming in Chico, not far from Yuba City. And so, but it was something that I had never, I'd never been on a farm. I'd never known that life. And so it was something I was really curious in. And he was like, we were both like, there's a story here. And we knew that, it could be a fiction, it could be a feature, it could be a short, it could be a doc, because Rajan's family is still very much in the community. And so when we got resourced to tell it as a doc, we were like, great, we can move in a few months and do this. And so that's the path we took. But we may still adapt it into a narrative feature and turn it into like a heist party film. So, yeah.
Thank you. So my film is about an Indian retirement community in Florida, and it's the first of its kind. But I really started the project thinking about my own parents and their aging. And I wanted a way to talk about what it looks like for immigrants to age in this country, and sort of some of the very specific things around being immigrants, coming to a home and a country that you adopt as your home, and just what that looks like. And so it was really a personal desire, because I saw my parents aging in my family. We were struggling with having conversations around, you know, what do we do when, you know, mom dies and dad's around, or dad dies, or what do they want to do in their lives when that happens? So it was a way to talk about all those things. And then in my research, I found this place. And I thought it would be really interesting to kind of locate the story in one place through the lives of these different residents. And the other thing I'll say that's interesting about my short is actually, I was trying to make it as a feature. So I spent, and we could talk more about this, but I spent a long time trying to make it as a feature, and it ultimately ended up as a short for a few reasons, primarily around raising the money to make it a feature, but the short, interestingly for me, still captured everything I wanted the feature to be, so.
Yeah, I would love to spend a little bit more time in kind of the world of your stories and the world of your characters before I get philosophical about shorts making and the nuts and bolts of that. All three of your films deal with intergenerational dynamics in kind of a very interesting way. And if you can kind of speak from your own experience there, do you kind of, and they're also very now, they're also very relevant. Are you seeing your films kind of on the spectrum of the history? Do you feel like you're writing a piece of history right now that hasn't been told, or needs to be told?
Well, I mean, I feel like you know, the whole immigrant bashing that's going on is a story that we're trying to help retell. I mean, we've heard the story. I mean, when I was growing up, we always talked about America being a nation of immigrants, you know. You know, but just recently, it's just like every discussion about immigrant is that they're bad for this country. And so I feel like in that sense, I was trying to remind people that, you know, immigrants have a really powerful story. And there's actually, shameless plug again, I keep talking about my book because that's all I do. But I have a line in my book which says, you know, yes, our family succeeded because of America, but America also succeeded because of my family. You know, and to me, it's like this two-way street. It's like, yes, we benefited, but you know, the country also succeeded because and I think that was sort of the spirit for me of retelling that. In terms of the generational thing, I mean, I guess that's always an issue. I mean, you know, as good Asian people, we're always thinking about our elders and like how to take care of them. Also, the responsibility that we have to our families, right? You know, to uphold the family name and to pay back for the sacrifices that our families give to us, I think.
Well, in the case of Harvest Party, we were making a film about a party, and we had one single photograph, so we had basically no archival. And, you know, we took a lot of creative risks on this project, which we can talk about what that was like, but part of the aspect of the intergenerational aspect was like, okay, this is a community portrait. We were leaning into the unreliable narrators of like, how do they remember this event, and then recreating it through reenactments that we shot on film. And that was a big aspect of it too, that was, you know, basically also, we, you know, rooted in Rajan as a character in the film, as he's sort of history of his family and what that's like, and then what that's like to recreate it. I mean, it was a really cool process to actually do that on the level of like, not even what you see on film, but the fact that like we created the conditions for this party to exist and had Rajan's dad and uncle and the people who were at this party be here. And so in that way, I don't know, I think film can be this interesting time travel and do things on that level. And then I think, you know, we were also trying to tell a really hopeful film, and a film that wasn't gonna be boring, that like my niece who's like 21 would wanna watch, and my grandma who's 80 would wanna watch. And how do you do that? How do you make it, how do you weave in all of the layers and the complexity, but also make it fun and hopeful? And I think, interestingly enough, I think also that's why we got funded, because it had some of those themes that we knew audiences would relate to, and maybe intergenerational audiences hopefully would relate to.
Yeah, for me, my parents represent a wave of Asian Americans, that came in after the 1965 Act was passed. And so what I was seeing was it wasn't just my parents or the friends of my parents who were aging. It was an entire generation that was coming of age as seniors. And because that was such a large immigration wave of Asian Americans. And so, that was part of what the story, part of what I wanted to tell in the story. And then intergenerationally, even though these folks were living in a retirement home, either as couples or by themselves, I so often saw their children visiting and, realizing that you might be living in a retirement home on your own and not, with your kids or in some kind of large family unit. And it was still so important to have those family conversations that were all dealing, whether as the children or the parents, with these issues. So it was really important to represent that in the film, and I think that's part of how we deal with aging. It is, as children, as parents, as a support network for looking at this stuff. So that was really key to represent in the film and show.
You spent a lot of time in the retirement community and getting to know all of the participants. I'd love to hear more about that trust-building journey for you. And is there any difference, having made a short versus a long-form film, to engage in that trust building? And what is that like when you're making, perhaps you only have so many production days or whatever it is? How is it different making a short versus a long form?
Yeah, it's funny because the film it's a short, but it took about 6 years while I was making it. And that's because, as I said, it did start as a feature, but there was also a pandemic in there. And even as the pandemic started, went on and we were able to start going there, it just took a while to get to this retirement community. They were seniors, of course, and so extra cautious. But we went out there for the first time, I think it was in 2021. Yeah, in the fall of 2021. And so in terms of building trust, we started that work during the pandemic with Zoom interviews. Like, we had decided we were about to go out there and film, and then the pandemic hit, and then we just started talking to people over Zoom. And it was the kind of community, because it was, everybody kind of knew each other, that once we got in with one person, they kind of led us to the next person. And the way I actually got in was I was talking to some friends of mine, and a good friend of mine said, our good friend's parents live there. So she introduced me to her friend, and I talked to the friend, who was somebody my age, and explained what I wanted to do with the film and kind of the things I was interested in. So it really was that personal connection that gave me access initially. And then, like I said, once I talked to her parents and explained it to them, they talked to all their friends that lived at the retirement community, and so on and so on. And so that we did for about on and off for 6 months to a year, those Zoom interviews. And then when we were finally able to go, because it was a residential community, we decided to rent one of the condo units, actually several of the condo units. We brought our crew, and we lived there for, what was it? The first shoot was maybe 8 or 9 days. I want to shout out Prerna, who's sitting in the yellow, who's my producer on the film. And I also want to shout out Grace because I was a CAAM fellow, and during 2020, and of course all the plans went up in the air because we were supposed to go out and shoot and talk about our projects, but we only ended up meeting online. And Grace wasn't my mentor, it was Ramona Diaz, but because we just decided to meet as a group, when I talked about the project, Grace was like, oh, this is great. And she wanted to be involved, and I wanted her to be involved. She led me to Geeta Ganbir, who became an EP on the project. But it was through that CAAM fellowship that we, sort of explored the idea, and like the film really started to take off. But just to finish up on trust, yeah, it was living there and really getting to meet people. And so as a crew, we stayed in the condo units, we ate the meals that were served in the residential hall, we walked around and just introduced ourselves to people, and everybody was generally really excited that we were there, wanted to know what we were there, and it was just a really great way to sort of build that trust, tell them about the project, and also, informally get a sense of whether we wanted to interview them for the project, whether they were going to be characters in the project. It's hard to know if I would have approached it differently as a short, because I went in there thinking of it as a feature, thinking I wanted to do it very verite, and I would find characters who would follow for a while. And so that initial 8-day shoot, which ended up being the bulk of the footage, was supposed to be one of many shoots. But that in-person time really paid off, like deeply.
Yeah, you were all kind of. Were you going to say? Yeah, you were all kind of coming, I think, from different places with how your short is a short. You were planning to make a feature film that became a short. Harvest Party at Camp 2 was conceived as a short, but you want to maybe turn it into a feature. And then Curtis PBS had approached you and said, would you like to make a short? Each of your films is 15 minutes, hovering around 15 minutes. I know, Sarita, your film is about 12. It's very interesting to hear a 6-year journey to make a 12-minute film. If you wouldn't mind sharing, how long did it make Curtis and Reaa for you to make your films? How long?
Sorry, I was telling a joke. How long did it take to make? It was actually a really quick process because, again, I was on a book tour, so I had to squeeze it in. So by the time PBS said we were selected to be part of this program, I think that was like October-ish or so, and I'd like to recognize Bob sitting back there, who is our contact person. And we started shooting by December in January. And then we did pickup shots in February, and we did post in spring, and then it was done by July. So everything was done in 6-7 months or something like that? Yeah. So a very, very quick process.
That's awesome. I know. I think from when we got funding, we filmed in a couple months after. We got the funding and we're like, okay, we're in pre-production now. We can do this. And we had, I don't know if we're gonna talk about money, but we had $40,000 to do it, and we were like, okay, ideally if we get 20 more, it gives us more room, but let's plan for this 40 so we can just start. And it just gave us the tools to just go. We shot it, and then it took us 2 years to edit, partly because I went to go meditate for 3 months. Sorry, Rajan. But it took us a little longer to edit, partly because I was like, I'm gonna go do this thing. And you were really generous with us in that time. And also we lost our producer, unfortunately passed away during that phase. And it was a moment for us to be like, okay, we've directed this thing so far. Bianca was producing, and then we had to sort of pivot in that process as well. But relatively quickly. And I think in that way, with a feature, probably would have taken a little longer. And can I say one thing on the shorts, the trust building? So obviously we had a sort of a privileged position here because we were, working with Rajan's dad and uncle, and there was a lifetime of relationship, and they really trusted us they were like, do whatever you guys want, and it gave us just so much room to take a lot of creative risks with them. So there was that, and then I think something I'm still tinkering with, I know I shared that article with you three of Rintu Thomas, this filmmaker who made Writing with Fire, writes about, I think an IDA wrote a great article that I'm still thinking about maybe a year later, a beautiful, something about, what was it, beautiful mess of, something to do with a reckoning in film, the beautiful mess of seeing. It's a really interesting article that I think as a field, we're still figuring out things around consent, power dynamics, and I think with features, those conversations, you're in people's lives for such a prolonged time. I think the stakes are higher in some ways. There's a lot of things we're still working out as a field, and I think with the short, maybe those stakes were a little lower. I don't know. We had less, we weren't in their lives actively every day for 5 years. So there's stuff I'm thinking about there of like how shorts are a different way in to deal with, not deal with, but really like work with the complexity around telling stories collaboratively and ethically.
Yeah, I think the conversation sort of, the trust build starts in a different place with a short, obviously when you're telling a story about your own family member, or it's a community that you feel you belong to. I would actually love to hear from Curtis what it was like getting to know Warren and his family.
Yeah, I mean, so I had so after, I decided I was going to put in an application, and I posted up on Facebook that I was looking for artists. I narrowed it down to 3 different candidates, and I did preliminary interviews with them to see, if we would vibe, see, what conversations might come up. And with Warren, it was really instantaneous, partly because, we're both from the Midwest, and we built that trust. I asked him to provide a few names of relatives or family friends that I could speak to. And I think that he got good feedback from those people, saying that, he's not a crazy person. He asked very legitimate questions about what was going on and stuff like that. And so I think like just being welcomed in and, showing that I cared about his whole story, and I was, by the types of questions I was asking in those pre-interviews, I think that gave a good sense, because Warren is actually not someone who needs publicity. He actually doesn't even sell his artwork. If you want to buy one of his pieces, he gives you the name of a nonprofit to donate the money to, because, okay, I'm just going to say this. His wife started working at Netflix when they were still mailing out DVDs. So they're fine, you know what I mean? And so, like for him, he really is just, doing his art on his own in his home. And it's through word of mouth that he's really getting a lot of attention. So he had nothing to gain from talking to me, but I think after having that conversation, he felt like, okay, well, why not try it? You know what I mean? He seems like an okay guy. I shared some similarities, and I think that really got him to sign up on board. So.
Are there any common misconceptions that you think exist, or any misconceptions that you may have had around, because you've all made different forms of, you've been involved in different forms of filmmaking, whether it's long form or television or whatever, or making a short. What would you tell someone who approaches, and I'm sure we'll probably get a question similar to this, like what did you think was true about making a short that you realized was not true?
Can I just say I really love the short form. I mean, like having done a few shorts now, I think it's the perfect length for me. And I think it's also the right length for the audience that I'm trying to reach out to. Particularly when, in Hollywood, all the notes that you're hearing is that, you have to dumb down things for the audience because people aren't paying attention and they're multitasking and things like that. I think with a 15-minute film or a 20-minute film, it's that sweet spot where people will commit to it 100%. But if it's anything longer, and they're multitasking. If it's anything shorter, they're just skimming through. So I actually really think that this is where a lot of things is exciting for me. And I do think that's an extra challenge, is like, how can you take a journey in 20 minutes and have it still be satisfying at the end? So it's creatively very exciting, but I also think that it's what the audience is looking for.
Yeah, very similarly. I love the short form, and it's just, it demands a lot of rigor, I think, to tell that story in such a short amount of time. And you have to make the tough choices and the creative choices to get there. And so I find it very stimulating to kind of be able to tell that story in a short form. And, you know, a misconception is like it's going to go faster than making a feature. Obviously, you know, it doesn't always. But yeah, I think it's a rigorous form that demands a lot of creativity, creative choices that I really love.
Yeah, it's like after the process was finished, it was like, oh, the constraints actually freed us in some ways or allowed us to get really specific in some ways. And like rigor is a great word there. And I think one of the things I'm seeing just in like having watched brilliant shorts over the last 3 weeks of like being on festivals is the range of like how many risks you can take, how creative you can get, and like you don't have to be formulaic, you don't have to do what narratives are doing, you don't have to even do the 3-arc structure at all. Like it's, in some ways you can be so much more free with how you want to say something. I mean, it's kind of awesome in that way, you know?
I agree. Yeah. I mean, yeah, let's talk about creative risks because I feel like in the short form, there are certain things that you can test out. If you're thinking of you know, filmmaking at scale and short form being the smaller scale, and so you can test out this idea in a smaller scale. Did you feel like that was what was happening with the creative reenactments that you were doing for Harvest Party at Camp 2?
Yeah, I mean, you know, our film has a very deliberate visual language. It has a very deliberate edit. Like there's very deliberate choices we've made, and part of it is reenacted. And so we were doing interviews for 2 or 3 days, and then that last night it was like, okay, this is what everyone said that we've sort of pieced in, like, this is what we're doing at the party tomorrow. Like, these are the scenes we have to get of, like, the teacher, George Papas, the high school principal, talking about, you know, how he remembers this kid, like, dropping a watermelon and breaking it open. It was this wild moment at the party, and the next day we got that on film. But a lot of it was an experiment to the last moment of, like, what is this truly going to look like? And it was great that we, you know, in a feature, we maybe wouldn't have had the kind of time and space to, like, play in that way that we did with the short. And like we have another, you know, shot in the film where, and it's like one of my favorite moments in the film, where one of our key characters, Rajan's uncle, Karm, we get introduced to him in this like all-American cowboy way, and it's like this grand pan up, and you see a Punjabi man with a pugri, you know, and a turban, and like the fact that we could do those things was so much fun, and the fact that they trusted us with that, and that we just got to play in that way was so awesome.
I like the idea of thinking of it as being playful. In what ways were you able to play in the short form that you weren't in any other form of filmmaking?
I think when it came to the edit, that was one of the times I felt like that we really were able to play, because we had to find a way of how to introduce each character in homes that looked exactly the same, for example, right? So everything was like, you know, the same beige color. Even the interior of the houses were all designed the same. And so, you know, in the edit, it pushed us to think about, well, how can we use that? You know, how can we reuse this kind of like same repetitive thing that we're seeing and actually make a creative choice around it? So so when we introduced each character, we did it with an exterior shot of their house, you know, and it says, whatever it says, the Malhotra's unit, 5. And just those exterior shots, which sometimes you don't even think about as going to be like such a grounding part of the film, we just kept doing that rhythmically, introducing each character, and it worked. Like, and it was a creative choice to do that with these exteriors, which all had their own little details of a home. Like, someone had one chair outside, someone had their walker outside, someone had a nameplate outside, but it was enough personality for each home that, you know, it just worked, you know. So even when things, look the same, it's like you find the moments there in the edit.
I mean, the only thing I'd say is, like, you know, with mine, I really like to just give Warren the platform. So I don't know if I was pushing the form in any way, but it allowed me to get really intimate with him and speak his own truth. And I think when that happens, it becomes less filtered in a way. So I like that, as opposed to, say, working in a narrative form where you have multiple characters to juggle, multiple scenes and things like that. Here, you could really just have a nice conversation with one person for 20 minutes.
Let's talk about other constraints. Budget. Let's talk about budget constraints, because we all have them in filmmaking. It's a thing, certainly for short form filmmaking. If you wouldn't mind sharing, what were your production budgets for these films?
I think ours was around 50. Yeah, around 50K. I got a little bit of grant money for development with CAAM, a little bit of investment, private donations, investment from, and then, I wanted to make a sizzle for the feature. And I ended up putting in, while we were doing all the grant writing and stuff, putting in some of my own money to get to that point. And as I said, it was a struggle to raise that money for a feature. And we ended up making a sizzle that was about 10 minutes with all the characters that you see in this film. It was, by the time we got to that point, I ended up probably putting in, maybe 20 more K. I mean, my philosophy is, when I make money in my day job or my work for hire, I always put a little aside in my creative fund to play with, because I never want to just be restricted by if I get a grant, I could make it, and so it was nice to tap into that money I'd put aside to make a project that I was really passionate about that didn't get traction in terms of getting more grants and stuff. But yeah, I think all in it was around 50K.
I don't know about you, but we got 10 million. I'm kidding.
Share it.
No, we got the same amount, 50,000 from American Masters. And it was great, though, because that's the first time that's ever happened for me where I had the money up front, which is like, okay, now I have a budget. I didn't have to stress about it. And that's why we were able to do it in such a compact way. I mean, all my previous films, it's sort of been like hand to mouth, right? Like you raise a little bit of money, you shoot, you just go on and on and on. So it's a real luxury this time. But it was 50,000 all in for production, post, marketing, everything.
Yeah, we had 40. And I've been in a sort of privileged position where the last 3 shorts I've done have all been funded, and that range has been between like 35 to 45, I want to say. And at the same time, like I don't, all in all, like when you're the filmmaker doing it, like I see the cost to us as like reimbursements because we're paying for other things that, and there's like LLCs that you're running and all of that. So that's not what I rely on for, for income. But it's great to have that because then you're at least resourced enough to have a crew, have talented people come on and be on board. And then the other thing that I feel like that is telling me or telling us is that, the money exists. It's not necessarily all in the same place. There's a lot of branded filmmaking, like brands like Remova, which are also investing in filmmakers to do like actual short form filmmaking that's more hands off. So one of my other collaborations, that was a paid short film that was sort of sponsored by the Forest Project, but we had authorship and we ran with the sort of creative ideas that we had. And the other one was a pitch fund with the Tasvir Pitch Fund and Netflix, which Rajan pitched, and it was a short narrative that we secured funding for as well. So there's a range, and even as, like, if we talk more about money, like even as the landscape is shifting, certain funds are pulling back, I see it as like, okay, we're in a transition, and so where is that transition happening? How can you position yourself to work with those people without losing your artistic voice and without losing your vision?
We're getting into fundraising now, which is a perennial challenge, but even more challenging in these times. I can speak from a historically publicly funded film funding organization that ITVS has supported the short form and short filmmaking and through our various funding initiatives through the years. The NMCA, CAAM, and the other members of the NMCA have done similar things. But outside of public funding, what have been some kind of reliable sources for you, if any of you can speak to that? And if there's nothing is reliable, that's an answer too.
Yeah, I mean, not much is reliable, and there's a lot of creative challenges, and I think, yeah, we're just in such an interesting moment. I've personally done a lot of branded type things with partners that have been the way for me to create. But I think there's a lot out there, and I think in this transition, it's also a real opportunity for filmmakers to get intentional, to actually create pathways collectively for what that can look like. And so, and I say that also on the level of like audience building as like a position to like, that's like a real bargaining power. And so there's things on audience that I think are also really connected to fundraising. But for me personally, branded has been another sort of lane.
I guess for me, I sort of take a step back and think of myself not just as a filmmaker, but more as a storyteller. And when I think of myself that way, it opens up more opportunities. So in the last few years, last 3 or 4 years, I've been paid not just to make this film, but I sold a book. I wrote a piece for Bon Appetit that got selected for Best American Food Writing. I wrote articles for CNN. I produced a podcast episode for America's Test Kitchen. I consulted on a TV show. And so, you know, so you just look for different ways that you can make money. But films are just part of that, I think, a part of your arsenal. What I just focus on is really what type of stories I want to tell, what is my vantage point, and then whatever the genre that I get hired for is really oftentimes not in my control, right? It's other people deciding that, hey, we want to pay you, you know, but at least they're picking me because, you know, they know my perspective, my worldview. And so, oh, and then I probably said my biggest income has actually been traveling around speaking, you know, not just for the book, but also films and things like that, because there's money out there, you know, not just schools, but corporations, nonprofits. Lots of these groups are paying to bring people in to talk.
Yeah, I think in terms of what's reliable, it's, I would say like my own income generating work, you know, as a director or producer, where then I can give myself some room to make my own work. And then also programs like ADOC had a partnership with World Channel, and I made a film that way, the Asian American Stories of Resilience and Beyond. And you know, that's always really fantastic because not only do you get some money and some support, but you also get the distribution. So those kinds of programs are amazing. You know, I know not reliable in terms of like we can count on getting into them. Not everyone can get in. You know, there's only so many films that those programs can even support, but and also those programs are also being cut and challenged. So it's what is reliable? Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
Can I share a quick story?
Absolutely.
This didn't happen, right? But I'm going to share it anyway. So my friend has a friend who works for a large corporation, Liberty Mutual. They take yoga classes together. And my friend was telling this yoga partner that, oh, my friend gives talks. So he's a filmmaker. You know, would you like to have him come in and speak? And she said, oh, yeah, I would love that. How much does he charge? Because if it's over 6 figures, then I need approval. So I'm like, I charge $99,909. So the point is that there's money out there. You just got to find it. I didn't get that 100,000, by the way, but we'll see.
I just got the 15-minute warning, so we can toss it to Q&A soon. But the one thing that I wanted to ask is, we didn't really talk about audience or your audience goals, and I think if you are making a short, certainly I am of the mind that social media or online distribution is going to be a piece of how you're going to reach audience. Are you thinking of that, or how far in advance are you thinking of that when you start to make a film? It is like what that distribution is going to look like and the audience that you're hoping to reach there.
So what's really interesting is I've been seeing and noticing that institutions are really putting the sort of burden of like the audience now on the filmmaker. And it can be easy to feel like, oh, do you guys want me to be a content creator now? Like, do you want me to go out? And I think there's that level of things happening. And then on the other side, the opportunity there is, for the first time, you don't need the festival, you don't need the distributor, you don't need all these middlemen to actually build a sustainable audience for yourself in the long term, which is very interesting, right? And so there's a gap there that I think there's opportunities for us to learn how to step into that. For Harvest Party, you know, we are doing things online, but also like we made this for farmers, we made this for our community. We want normal Americans to watch this who might not come to film festivals. And so we're definitely thinking of how do we get it to where the people are. And, you know, like we have festivals that we've applied to locally where the intention is that we want local audiences to see it. Rajan's a professor of history. We're looking at, okay, what are education curriculums we can do? How can we get this film incorporated into curriculums like ethnic studies curriculums, Asian American studies curriculums, so that it has a life beyond just like, oh, we just made this short to make a feature. Like you shouldn't treat shorts as like a calling card just towards a feature. And then there's things of like, what are you doing long term? So, you know, with my company, where it's a lot about, you know, audience building, I want it to be an artist ecosystem as well. Like we're doing things outside of just project, where it's like, we had a little zine, and like we have filmmaker resources, where you're building long-term direct audience relationships that are actually broader than one project, so that can build as you grow, as the life of this project or the next project goes, that you have that direct relationship. So there's a lot of, like, there's a real gap there in the industry, and I think it's really interesting and something that we should be leveraging more as a position of negotiation and power for yourself as a filmmaker. And we're still figuring it out, but those are some things.
So between the films I've made and the book that I just wrote, I've gone to over 1,000 places in 20 countries giving talks. You know, and for me, I like to think of it, I'm not going out there just to sell product. Like, I actually feel like I'm going out to build community. I mean, because I feel like that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, with the stories tell. It's interesting to me because I actually make a living writing books and making movies, but I've never taken a memoir writing class. I've never taken a filmmaking class. You know what I mean? It's just stuff that I learned on the road because it's stuff that I care about, right? Which is building up, uplifting the Asian American story. And so that's what I do. And I'll give an example. Again, you know, from my book tour, you know, I did about 35 events in Chinese restaurants. The book is called Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. I did 35 events in Chinese restaurants where I talked about the book for like 5 minutes, but then I invited the owner of the restaurant to come up, and I interviewed them, and I asked them their story and what their challenges were, what their favorite dishes were, and we just had this really, really nice conversation, and it was about connecting with these people. But the reality is, I sold just as many books during those events as I did with a traditional book talk where I just talked about the book. Do you know what I mean? So it is really about connecting with that audience and getting them to feel like you're one of them and connecting with them. And I think that goes with film as much like books or anything that you're creating.
Yeah, and I think with audience, you're building it one film, you're building your audience one film at a time. So, you know, it's not just for that film that you're starting from scratch. You're bringing everything you did with you before, letting people know about the next project. And certainly social media is part of it. And these days, people want you to build your audience even before you've shot, you know, anything. Like, you know, start telling people about the film on social media, start sharing your process in social media. And it does help, you know. I mean, it's not my favorite thing to do, you know, to be on social media, but it does help, and to build awareness and to get people invested. But yeah, I think also for, you know, our film, we're really thinking broadly in terms of impact as well, and not being so precious with the film, you know, really wanting to use it in all kinds of settings to talk about the issues that are related to the film, letting it be a tool, giving it to community organizations, not just in the South Asian and Asian American communities, because aging affects everybody. And so I think just thinking as broad as possible with specificity about your audience and try to reach those places and, getting it out there. Yeah.
I would love to throw it out to the audience if anyone has questions.
I'm curious, Sarita, you mentioned that when you finished the short, you were surprised that you were able to fit in all the things that you wanted for the feature. Is there a part of you that still sees a feature in it, or did finishing it as a short kind of change your mind about that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I was surprised how much the short held from my original vision. Like it had it all. And it's funny because after seeing the short, people are like, you should make this a feature. I'm like, that ship has sailed. So a lot, like I've heard that a lot now. But, I wouldn't make that specific story as a feature. Like I'm still interested in the themes of aging and immigrants and what that cultural longing and home and all those things. But, I think I wouldn't just make it about that same place. I would work on the themes, but I feel peacefully done with telling that story about that place.
Consider it as a comedy series. Just planting a thought.
I mean, now there's like that was yeah, offer. I mean, now the place I filmed at was the first of its kind. Like it was the first Indian retirement complex to be created. Now there's many more, and with each one, the residents have their own kind of personality and their own vibe, and there are some that are much funnier than the place that I filmed at. So there is a series in there somewhere. Yeah, we're talking to them. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
We are definitely talking to them.
Just following up on this idea of going from short to feature, Reaa, you said you are maybe thinking that direction. What made you, in the process of creating your short, why now do you think that there is a feature in it?
Yeah, I mean, there's more storytelling there for us. I mean, it's a really layered project, and I think, also the fantasy of what this party really was, what these kids who had this life devoted to basically like labor and hard work, getting to have this night as South Asian, Punjabi farm workers. There's so much in that, I think, that we're like, we want, there's maybe more to explore. And, Dazed and Confused, Project X, but brown kids. And, and Rajan's a really awesome writer, and so we're like, let's just start the process and see the resources that we get as we do it. I think there's a bit of unfinished business still.
It seems to me that there's a lot more opportunities for shorts, anecdotally, but I'm curious, where are your next steps for, beyond festivals, for distribution? And what are your strategies for that? And are you finding that will lead to, say, more impact opportunities? Just your thoughts on that.
I mean, I can from an institution perspective, ITVS, we are a funder and co-producer of short and long-form documentary films, and we have a partnership with PBS. And so distribution is very, very much built into our partnerships, our production agreements with filmmakers. And our goal has always been to be where the audiences are, to innovate with storytelling, and to bring these undertold stories to the American public and meeting them where they are. and sparking conversations. And so for shorts, there's a lot of opportunity for us. I mean, we're always looking for short form storytellers and bringing them to the public media forum. So that's one opportunity that's available and has been, developed and changed and evolved in many different ways. We are actually also supporting content creators now. It is just a new form of innovative storytelling that we want to play in. And so, YouTube is the new public, for better or for worse, YouTube is one of the many new public forums that we have, and we need to be in that public space as well, and we want to help other filmmakers come to this public space. You talked about audience building. It is a challenge, especially if you're an independent creator, an independent filmmaker who does not necessarily want to be in the business of being a content creator, because in order to do that, in order to build a great YouTube audience, you need to be producing content constantly and feeding that beast. That's not sustainable for a lot of filmmakers. So PBS, it being a network, and ITVS having this partnership with PBS, we've built this space and are inviting independents to come tell their stories, and we're helping them build that audience for those stories.
So going back to that point I was trying to say about like having multiple hats, one thing that for us, so with Warren King, we had our distribution set beforehand because it's going to go through PBS's YouTube channel, right, and through American Masters. But a additional thing that I've discovered that's available because I do multiple different things is that I have all these schools that are bringing me out to do a book talk in the evening, right? And they pay thousands of dollars to do that. But I don't think they'll pay thousands of dollars to bring me out just to do a short film, a 15, 16-minute film. But I can pitch it as additional revenue by saying, oh, since I'm already out on your campus, I'll do an event during the daytime for your filmmaking studies. So I have the English and creative writing department sponsor the evening, and then I have the film department, you know what I mean? And it becomes extra money, right? And that adds up pretty quickly, if you're going to lots of schools.
I'll just add one thing. So we'll be with Independent Lens in the fall, and we're doing our festival run now. But it's true, there's a really big appetite for shorts. There isn't reliable space that really gets to live. And so I think interesting things can happen. Maybe there's going to be more filmmaker-led spaces. Maybe there's going to be festivals doing digital, like all year round programming. Maybe eventually a streamer is going to be like, oh, Love, Death, and Robots kind of worked. Maybe we should be curating shorts really intentionally. And I think there's things like in this phase, well, these guys are all figuring it out that like we should come up with creative solutions.
And I see we're at time, so thank you all so much. Oh,
can we take
what?
a selfie? Because I take a selfie and everything. But
Wait, with the audience as
yes.
well?
So the audience will be there. You, as my fellow panelists, you can
Okay.
stand behind me.
Sure.
You know how to do this. People on the side, if you want to move into the center. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you all so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day.